And we are live. All right. Good evening, everyone. Pastor Tim here and Pastor John. We are going to give people a couple minutes to log on and join us for the Love Works webinar as we are hanging out and waiting for people to sign on. We'll just chat a little bit here. And as you sign on, leave a comment. Let us know where you're watching from. You've got, 3 different campuses here for Bethany and then multiple states represented. So as you tune in, leave a comment. Let us know that you're with us. Pastor John, how are you this evening? How are things?
I didn't know this was called a webinar. Like, this is bona fide now. Wow, I'm good.
It's official.
I'm in Nottingham. It's really nice. Quiet.
John, you were just saying that it's like snowing, but it's not like insanely snowing at this point.
No, it's not. It's nice and fluffy.
Yeah.
And small.
I heard today on the radio, they said that it takes a while to determine if a snowstorm is actually a blizzard because there has to be a certain amount of time that passes and levels of wind. So we're not officially in a blizzard at this point. We're just in a snowstorm. So, all right, we got some people tuning in. Leslie's here. Hey, Leslie. Hey, Lisa. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm going to leave the information up here that I shared before. But you'll see some links as you sign on, and I'll explain those in a little bit. We've got a couple other people. Sheila Ann and Frank Diane, thanks for tuning in. Tim Haran, good evening to you, sir. Glad to have you with us. We got 18 people signed on. We'll give them another probably 2 minutes and let people join us. Take some time. John, I hope nothing strange happens in front of your computer because I can see what's happening in your window behind you. So if
you can see.
Yeah, if she shows up and starts like waving and making signs and things, I want to know what's going on here. Hey, as you join us this evening, there we go. Hey, Jan, thanks for joining us. As you join in, let us know that you're watching. Leave a comment, and then we'll jump into things in about a minute here or so. Jan is
okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, as you're talking, and you're like, everyone's popping up where they're from, it just reminds me of the old flea market on 97.5 WOKQ, where people call in and they're like, "Hey, I'm from Rochester and I got a car." So it just is really cool. Like,
there you go.
Who knew they had it 30 years ago?
That's right. I heard people say it reminds them of Romper Room. It's like I see Johnny and I see Timmy and all right. Kathy's joining us. Leanne's here. Hey, Sally and John, thanks for joining us. John is here. John Leonard. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, people. We got about 22 people who are signed on. We'll give it another minute or so. We already got our first laughing emoji from somebody, so I don't know what that means about us. Oh, 2 laughing emojis now. It's going downhill, John. As you sign on, leave a comment. Let us know that you're watching. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you can hit that thumbs up button and those hearts, that just basically lets Facebook know that we've got people engaged. So that's always helpful for the algorithms that Big Brother's watching us. Hey, Joy, thanks for tuning in as well. All right, we'll give out 1 more minute, and then we'll hop into the content for this evening. Got a couple of thumbs up and hearts that are popping up. It does looks like that. Okay, we're good. I thought we were getting only laughs, John. So that's good, but I want to be considered at least mildly serious sometime.
No, totally. Yeah.
Cape Beddick. All right, why don't we kick things off? We'll jump into the content here. I know we'll be having more people jump in, and we'll try to say hello to you if we can do that. And then also, this is going to be on Facebook after the fact. You can watch it later, and YouTube as well, so people can join in. As we kick things off, this is our Love Works campaign, and we're going to give you all the details. I do want to give a special shout out to Jan Dietrich, our kids ministry director over at the Greenland campus, just for all the work she's done in using this idea of Love Works over the years. It's just a really great thing that she's been doing as far as teaching the kids and the families to not just have love be about words, but about deeds and words together. So Jan, thanks for your work. And she's made this really possible in a lot of ways. So really appreciate what you've done. Here's where we're going tonight. I'm going to just give us a quick rundown of what the evening is going to look like. We'll be here for about 45 minutes. I want to explain the details of Love Works, and then John's going to start and lead us into some biblical foundations about this idea of what does it look like to love our neighbors as ourselves. If you have questions, you can feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll try to tune in there and jot those down while John's doing some teaching, and then we can come back and answer some of those. And then we want to give you some practical ways to get out there and to love your neighbor as yourself. So that's kind of the flow of the evening, some of the tactical details, some theology, and then some how do you go and do this. So with that said, John, why don't you pray for us and kick the evening off that way?
Sure. All right, let's pray. Father, I thank you that you have called us to a mission of loving you and loving others. And I would say in my lifetime, there's no greater time than the present right now, what we're going through, to be able to just love our neighbors and to make an impact with a kind word, a gesture, or as Jan has been teaching the kids for many years, just a small little token of our love that we share with them. It will go a long way, especially with the climate and the culture we're living in. So I pray that as we discuss these principles from your word, and then as we all learn about how we can live this out practically, I pray that you would encourage us by your spirit, and you would give us the courage and strength to be your hands and feet and to see our neighbors and our communities changed. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thanks, John. All right. So let's go through some of these details. Like I said, we have this LoveWorks campaign. The dates we're starting right now, and this is going to go until 11:59 on Valentine's Day night. So it's going to go up to the 14th of February, straight through. The goal is relatively simple. Tonight, we want to offer some biblical grounds and encouragement for the idea of loving our neighbors. And then we want to just encourage you to get out there and do that. And what you're going to hear tonight is the theology, and then also, as John just mentioned, kind of the simplicity of it. Let's not overcomplicate it. Let's not overthink it. Let's just get out there. And these tiny little acts of love and service to others really go a long way. They really significantly impact people. So tonight, John's going to lead us into some scripture. I'll share some thoughts as well. I do want to note that in the comments section, you'll see there's 2 links, and you can find these over on the Hope Rising page as well. So the first link is a PDF, which is ideas of how to go out and love your neighbors. It's a list that Jan put together, and it's ideas, ways you can go out there and care for people. The other link is to My Bethany, and that's a place where you can go and share stories with myself and John. And then we're going to compile those stories, and we can keep them anonymous if you ask that to be done. But we just want to hear, what's happening as you're going out and encouraging and loving your neighbors. What are ways that God's using you to minister and to care for others? And we hope it's an encouragement to you and certainly a blessing to them. And for us to kind of have those stories loop back, that's always a blessing to kind of hear what's happening. So like I said, as we go through the content tonight, if you have questions, feel free to pop them into the comment section here, and we'll try to loop back at various points to jump into that. So we're going to start off with this kind of theology, and John's going to talk about the idea of loving your neighbor. So John, kind of kick us off. I think some people, when they hear the idea of loving your neighbor, they're like, I know that's in the Bible. Jesus probably said it, but give us some grounding, whether it's Old Testament, New Testament, both. Give us some sense of where does this idea of loving your neighbor come from?
Sure. So I remember in Bible college going into Old Testament, and I grew up in church, so I knew all the stories of the Ark and all of those great, exciting stories. But I remember reading Leviticus and coming across Leviticus 19, and in this passage, it's going to break up different ways that we can love our neighbor. And I specifically remember reading verse 9, where it says, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after you harvest. And you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. And I remember reading that going, it's such a simple thing to do. Farmers, they want to get as much out of their crops as they can, but just to leave that for someone, that the neighbor had to do the work, but it was to leave that blessing for them. It goes on and it says, you shall not steal, you shall not deal falsely, you shall not lie to one another, you shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. And then it goes on, you shall not oppress your neighbor or rob him. The wages of a hired worker shall not remain with you all night until the morning. You shall not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear your God. I am the Lord. And then he goes on in verse 17, you shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. And as you listen to these, you think, oh, this is New Testament. But God was in his law laying out for the Israelites just simple ways to love your neighbor. And as I hear this, I'm thinking it's so applicable today, just as it was back then. Don't lie, don't steal, be kind. Simple things, but that's from the Old Testament.
Yeah, it's interesting as you were talking about this idea of like leaving leaving, basically some of the harvest, not taking it in, but leaving it at the edges of your field. It's almost not doing something is loving your neighbor, right? So it's like, I'm not
Mm.
going to harvest that. I'm just going to leave that. And it jumps out to me in all these sections that you read, this idea of, I am the Lord, I am God. And so connect those dots first, because I think sometimes people, when they think about the idea of loving their neighbor, they say, okay, I got to love God. And then number two is I got to love my neighbor. But Jesus in the New Testament even says the second command, like unto it, is to love your neighbor. So help us think about, how does loving God and loving neighbor, how do those two things kind of work in a symbiotic relationship? How do they feed off one another?
Sure. Just last week in my WIF group in Raymond, I asked them, what's the one way to love God? And of course, I said no Sunday school answers, no reading your Bible, praying, but other ways. And someone said, well, you can love your neighbor, because as you love your neighbor, it's an expression of your love for God. So it's very much connected. And as you love God, that's how you're doing it, by just showing a kind word. You're loving God by obeying his word. And I think it's interesting when it does say, I am the Lord your God, he's laying it out there and saying, this is who I am. You are my people. And this is the standard by which I call you to live. And it's a way of holiness. And we're called to be holy as the Lord is holy. And holiness isn't something like we're to be aloof, or we're to be, that's not the right word, better than someone else. But we're to serve them. We're to humbly serve them and to care for them and to love them. So it's just a reflection of our love for God is when we love our neighbor.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like you talked about God's people, but then you also have the foreigner, you have the stranger, you have when they leave Egypt, you have even some of the people from Egypt leaving with them and saying, we're leaving these other gods behind, we're going to follow your God. And so the idea in the Old Testament is starting to be laid out to say, it's not just the people that you want to be neighborly to who are kind of part of your group, it's those who aren't in your group as well, right? So the Egyptians enslaved me, and yet you're telling me I'm supposed to love this person, to be kind to them, and invite them into our family of, our family of the chosen people. And God's like, yeah, they're not necessarily directly of you, but they're going to become part of what I'm doing. That's a very different way. And especially in our world today, man, I mean, you know it as well as I do. You're supposed to love the people who are just like you and think just like you and live in the same echo chamber that you do, but then saying, no, you're supposed to love the people who are not like you. Oh, that's getting in my personal face right there. All of a sudden, like, so let's jump to the New Testament, and this idea of loving your neighbor as yourself. Clearly, people are probably most familiar with that from the teachings of Jesus. So give us some information on that one, John, from the Bible.
Sure. You already mentioned it, but a teacher of the law came to Jesus and he said, of all the commandments, which is the most important? And you could just tell from the story, trying to trick him, trying to catch Jesus off guard and really to catch him up on his own words. Because if he picks one, then they're going to say, well, what about this one? Or what about that one? And Jesus answered, the most important one is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. And what he quotes is Deuteronomy, that Old Testament part of the Shema, where it defines God, or it describes God as one God. And that was unique in Old Testament. Even in, I would say, in the New Testament, where there are a plurality of gods. You have the Romans with all of their idols. And he's saying you have one God and you love him, and then you love your neighbor as yourself. And that's hard, because I don't know about everyone watching, I love myself. Like, of all the people in the world, I think I love myself the most, because I take the best care of myself more than I do probably everyone else. So that really sets a high standard for us. And all the other commandments, they all feed into that. If you kind of break them down, it's either loving God or loving neighbor.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, and Jesus basically says there, if you're doing these, you're gonna check the rest of the boxes, right? It's hard to, if you're loving your neighbor, you're not stealing from your neighbor. If you're loving your neighbor, you're not coveting your neighbor's things. If you do this, you'll make sure that you're doing all the other things well. I was thinking about this idea, and it just in the notes that John and I were sharing about this. Luke 10, that story of the Good Samaritan, we think about, it's really interesting how much biblical language is infused into our culture today. People say like, oh, there's the Good Samaritan law, or go be a good Samaritan, but it's literally right out of the Bible. And you have this teacher of the law in the same way is trying to test Jesus, right? And saying like, okay, so what should I do? And Jesus tells them a story about a Samaritan who cares for somebody in need. And he's clearly painting a picture to say, this is the least likely person who you would think that would do a good thing and that you could be friends or kind to or view as somebody who deserves honor. And so he's really, really throwing a monkey wrench in the idea of, if I'm a Levite, I'm going to love my fellow Levites. I'm a priest, I'm going to love the priests. If I'm this type of person, I love people who are like me. But he says, no, you're going to love people who actually are really different. And I love that passage because the idea of loving your neighbor, clearly you start to see neighbor is not just literally the people who live next door to you. It's pretty much anybody with whom you come into contact. But I know last summer, I think it was last summer. It's so funny with COVID. I'm like, was it last summer or was it 25 years ago?
2 years ago, I think.
I think it was 2 years
ago.
Right? You did this teaching on the idea of the art of neighboring. So share a little bit about that, kind of what inspired you to do that, because this whole idea of loving your neighbor, I mean, that's directly tied to this book that you'd been teaching on. So share a little bit about your experience with that.
Sure. So I listened to the authors at a Go conference in Massachusetts, and the book really, to break it down, it talks about how if we take this Luke 10 passage and say that this person is everyone, which it is. Jesus is saying to the Jews, it's not just your neighbor physically, but it's everyone. And the authors were stating that if we're not careful, we can take the concept of everyone and then say, well, it's metaphorical because there's not any way I can love everyone like I love myself. So I remember one line in particular when he says, if this is a metaphorical statement, then we're going to think about loving our metaphorical neighbors, and we're going to literally love no one.
Mm-hmm.
And as I read that, I also, and I mentioned him probably too often, but Mr. Rogers, I grew up with him as a kid, and it's called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood because as a pastor, or as I think it was a missionary, and he was ordained and he desired to reach the world and specifically reach kids for the gospel. And as you listen to his teaching, though he doesn't have any scripture, he's teaching biblical principles of just loving your neighbor. Mm-hmm. And he was reaching thousands or millions. So that's what really got me on this concept, but it was the who's your literal neighbor. Because I'd grown up with the love abstractly, but then I started meeting my real neighbors and I'm like, oh, it takes a lot of work to love someone you see every day.
Right.
But it's been really encouraging to our family. We've grown to be really good friends with some of our neighbors, and we've seen God just blessing us personally through them. So it's awesome. What really got me excited about it.
Yeah. And that book is called The Art of Neighboring. Do you remember who the authors are? The author is?
Jay Patek, I think. Okay. The cover of it has, if you remember the Brady Bunch, it has 9 squares, and your house is in the middle, and then it has the other squares around it.
Got it. Okay.
So that's the yellow cover.
So there's a resource if you're interested in digging into this topic of how do I love my neighbor or neighboring well. This book called The Art of Neighboring. I want us to turn a corner here, and it's really clear when you go to the Old Testament, it's there. When you go to the New Testament, it's there. It's all throughout the prophets in the Old Testament that God is literally angered at the nation of Israel for the way they treat the social outcasts, those who, he says, you have these festivals and these sacrifices, you bring all these things to me, but you're ignoring taking care of people, loving people, caring for the orphan and the widow. So it's replete. It is all through the Bible, this idea of loving your neighbor. Thanks for posting that link there. Somebody just posted
you got it.
Comment section. So if you're watching on Facebook, you'll see that link, and you can head over and pick that up on Amazon, The Art of Neighboring. So here's what I want to do now. I want to kind of turn us the corner to say, okay, what does this look like in your life, maybe in my life? Like, what are some examples of either how you have loved your neighbor, John, or also maybe how a neighbor, whoever that was, has loved you or your family well? Give people a sense of what it looks like. Because again, I think sometimes we think it's got to be some huge thing, and sometimes it's these little moments that have such a big impact. Why don't you share some examples?
Sure. So as a kid, I lived with my grandmother on and off. And our little driveway was about $40 to plow. Our neighbor, who still doesn't know Jesus from all that I know right now, he would just plow the driveway. And it was just his way of living out this commandment that he didn't even know Jesus taught. And he would just do it. My grandmother would always sputter at him. Like, why would you do that? And he's like, because you're my neighbor. And it's just the right thing to do. So as a kid, I saw that. And then as an adult, my wife is a baker. So she loves to bake and cook. So she'll just bake a whole bunch of stuff. And she started going to our neighbors when we moved to Nottingham. And it's just been exciting just to start with food and build that relationship. And when my wife went into labor, was it June? it was kind of, spur of the moment. You're never prepared. So we just went across the street and we said, can you take the kids? And this woman who has 3 of her own took my 3 kids and took care of all of them so I could take her to the hospital. And it was just that practical it was just very practical, just loving my neighbor, and then they loved me back. And it's just been my friend 2 houses down went to home church yesterday with our family, and it's just building a relationship with him and helping him as he's selling his house. So it's rewarding that I don't have to use all my pastor skills in this way. It's just cut a tree down with them, rake their leaves, just have them over for dinner.
Yeah, this is interesting that I mean, John and I didn't prep this. We just said, well, we're going to share some examples. But John, you can look at my notes that I sent to you. I literally have examples about like shoveling the driveway and neighbor moving wood. So maybe it's a New England thing, but probably 2 or 3 years ago, I got really sick right during a huge snowstorm, and a bunch of folks from Bethany showed up and they helped shovel the driveway and shovel the walk. And literally there was snow on the roof. And so they were like going out the windows and pushing snow off our front porch roof. It was just like, I couldn't do anything. Jenny had the kids and they just came and loved us and served us. I have a neighbor who has since moved, but he lived in an apartment next door. It was a house that was rented. And so he had to wait for people to come and plow him out. And so if he had to get to work early, he would be stuck. And so when I would go and snow blow our driveway, I'd go down, probably 20 yards down the road, and I'd snow blow the end of his driveway so he could get his car out. And whenever I came down there, he would stand there at the end of his porch and watch me, because he felt like I can't be inside in the warmth while Tim is out here doing this work. And I would just kind of wave and say, just go inside. No big deal. No big dew. And he would just kind of stand there like, no, I have to be here. I thought, man, what a New England thing to do. Like, I'm going to suffer because you're suffering snow blowing. But yeah. And then I was just, I jotted down this note that we had, like the power company come and cut some trees down near our house. And when the wood falls down there, anybody who wants to come take it can. Our neighbor across the street, he heats with wood. And so he was collecting some of the wood one day, and he was trying to haul these massive pieces of something really, heavy wood, not like some pine or something. And so I just went out and I said, hey man, let me give you a hand, and helped him haul, a couple of big logs across the road, tossed it in his yard. And then he took care of it later. It wasn't rocket science. I was like, literally, I was probably like, in a pair of flip flops and, shorts. And I was like, hey, you're carrying wood. Let me throw my sneakers on, come help you carry it. So the examples that you're hearing from John and myself are not these, like I refinanced my house and gave somebody, this massive loan so they could put a garage on their house. Like, that's great. But also like literally carrying some wood for your neighbor, helping some plow out. It's relatively simple. I think when I would go once or twice a year, I'd be away at a conference or something. And I would call my friends or text my friends, Jeff and Glenn, and say, hey, when I'm gone, can you guys just check in, make sure Jenny and the kids are doing okay? And it didn't require anything of them during the time because nothing came up. But just knowing that when I'm away, there's a neighbor who's checking in on my family, that means something. That makes a difference. So, all these things just to give some very simple, practical examples of ways that people can love their neighbors. So let's
Tim,
jump in.
I want to share one more. This is kind of a fun story. So my neighbor across the street, the state trooper, and they just moved in, and I wanted to love my neighbor. So I'm out there like 5:30 in the morning snowblowing for him because he has a cruiser. It's really small, low to the ground. And I guess it's 4-wheel drive, just to let you all know. So he pulls out over a foot of snow, drives right out. He's like, what are you doing? Like, it's 4-wheel drive, dude. Don't worry about it. So when you do love your neighbor, you want to like maybe ask a few questions, because I thought I was being all helpful and it was like a half an hour. And he's like, no, don't worry about it. I'm going to have it plowed right when I leave. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
There you go. So good to know them a little bit too.
That's right. There you go. Yeah. So, I mean, one might say, oh, that was a fail, but it wasn't, because he saw that you cared, and he's like, okay, well, this guy's doing his best to, be kind to me. I've actually got a friend who lives here in town in Newmarket and if I have the story right, he lives in a neighborhood and he's got a truck and he has a plow on it, and he just plows everybody in the neighborhood out when the snow comes. It's just kind of one of the things he does. It's not 500 houses, but he goes and does it. And it's just a way literally to love his neighbor. A lot of these themes are snow. Did you notice that? I don't know. That's how we love our neighbors in New England, I guess. So I'm going to see if we can actually make this happen. I'm going to try to share the screen here. I think this will work. This is going to be, right here. We're going to show you the list of ways that was put together. And these are ways that you can love your neighbor. So again, Jan Dietrich put this together. Thanks again, Jan, for all the work. I'll kind of scroll down here in a minute, but John, why don't you just start off just to remind people, because we are in COVID, there are some things they need to be careful of. So just give people a quick rundown of that.
Yeah, sure. So no matter how you feel about COVID, someone else has a different opinion about it. So I'm always being extra careful. And if someone's like, hey, don't worry about it, okay, then I can relax a little bit. But we don't want to unintentionally offend someone or unintentionally pass something on. So if you're going to give stuff, like he has here, sanitize anytime you're going to give something, pack the gift a few days before giving it, just so you let the germs die. And it's not just COVID, because especially with people that are older, they're quarantining and you might pass something else to them. It may not be COVID, but it might be something else that, because they haven't been outside, their immune system is just low.
Right.
Wear a mask and sanitize before you interact with people. Again, I go to the store, even when COVID first started, I was like, I don't know if I should. I just wear it anyway, and then now, of course, we do. But just take the extra step, go the extra mile, and assure the person that's going to receive it that you tell them you're taking precautions. Because if you notice, sometimes I go to the store, people they're very nervous even to talk. So just be careful of that and just be aware of how people are feeling right now.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So I'm going to kind of scroll down the screen here, and we'll John and I'll go back and forth and just share some thoughts. Cards are a great way to do it. Go and you can buy a box of cards. You could go and buy, go to Market Basket or Shaw's or Hannaford or whatever, buy 3 cards, spend 10 or 12 bucks, and then send a note to somebody. Like, just be like, hey, I was thinking of you. Hope you're doing well. I mean, we all know everyone gets emails and texts all the time, but you get snail mail and you're like, what the heck is going on, right? You're wondering what the story is. So those little actions make a difference. Police and firefighters. I was praying with the kids at dinner, and then when I just put Hudson to sleep, and just asking for safety from God for all those people who are out there serving, firefighters and police and people who are out running the plows in the snow. So even just something as simple as if you drive through, a construction zone and it's not dangerous, you can slow down and roll down your window and say, hey, appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much for the way that you're serving. Simple things like that just go a really long way. And I'm noticing here, Jan, I think it's Jan here, said kid made cards are awesome and well loved. It does mean something, If you have your kids, if I draw a card with crayons, people are gonna be like, that's a little bit weird. But when your kid does it, they're like, wow, some little kid made an effort. I've got cards that kids gave me before Kittery opened, when I was still serving in Greenland, on Father's Day or Valentine's Day, and I would just I have it in the Bibles as like bookmarks and stuff that kids made. I might not even know who the child was, but it meant something that they did that. So, John, what else from this list is jumping out to you as far as ways that you've seen helpful and impactful when it comes to loving our neighbors?
I went to someone's house to pick up a crib. It was one of those free finds on Marketplace, and I was going to use it for like gates around the house. I like to build things, and the lady left me a gift card on the crib and just said thank you. And then I looked at her house and she had just some food there and water and snacks for the UPS drivers and stuff. And that was kind of cool. Mail carriers, I have to say, Amazon, UPS, I've never seen them drive by my house so much ever than they have in the last 2 months. And it's like 8 o'clock at night they come by. So I'm thinking it's great I get my package, but they're leaving their family for this. So anything you can do to love on them. Trash collector, that's kind of cool. Like, I see that, and that is a very thankless job because it's an expectation. So just leaving something for them, that would go a long way. And then hospitals, I know with schools and hospitals, you maybe can't go in, but is sending something or dropping something off. We did that with Lamprey Elementary School this year with Bethany, and the teachers are so appreciative of just the chocolates they dropped off.
Yeah. And I just want to, I feel like I'm banging this drum really hard, but I want to say it again. The littlest things can make a huge difference, right? So I think someone was, I don't want to kind of spill the beans here, but I know someone who I think went and bought just a bunch of chocolates, like Lindt chocolates, and then delivered them to local teachers. And it was, it was like they delivered chocolate that was wrapped in literal gold. It was just like, wow, it's so much. It was chocolate. It was a nice effort, but it wasn't something that would be life-changing, but it felt like you took the time to do this for me. And so that really means a lot. How about the idea of bringing a meal to somebody in need or bringing groceries to somebody in need, right? I'll tell you one thing that I learned from a friend of mine, Sandy, and she's such a servant-hearted person, but she does a nice job of sometimes asking and other times just doing it, right? Because I find that it's particularly in New England, if I say, John, do you have any needs? Like, do you need any groceries? I'll come bring you some stuff. John's gonna 99% of the time say, no, I'm good, even if his refrigerator is totally empty. So a better option is go and buy some groceries and drop it off at somebody's house and say, hey, I know you've had a busy stretch. I just want to get some groceries for you. Something as simple as that, spend $25 maybe, and that's a gift for somebody. I see this one about, pay for their coffee or, a meal or something like that for the person behind you in the drive-through. John, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but I've had it happen to me a couple of times, and I really feel like I won the lottery. I pull up and take out my debit card, and the lady's like, "Oh, that guy just paid for you," and I'm like, "Are you serious?" Like, it's such a nice feeling when people do that. Let's kind of shift here, and I'll scroll down again. John, I know you got a lot of kiddos in the house, so what are some ways that we can get kids and families involved in this?
People love kids, so I'll do something. I'll sometimes bring, especially my daughter, because she's just adorable. Bring one of the kids with me, and they have more fun seeing the child than they do actually whatever I'm giving them. It just brightens up their day. So sometimes I'll just take one of them with me to do something. My daughter likes to make stuff, so we went to the dentist a couple weeks ago, and she just on her own and made 2 little cards with hearts and gave them to the receptionist just to say thank you on her own. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. So that's something small. As I look at this, walk a neighbor's dog, my kids, I don't want my kids. We got them to walk my dog, but walk the neighbor's dog. Yeah, that's something that they could do. But making cards, flowers, random crafts, my kids, they're just creative, and just to let them express themselves and then share it with someone, or a phone call, or Zoom. We've been doing that. That people love it just because kids are so cute on the phone. So those are little things that they do. I have to admit, though, I'm not with them as much as my wife, and I'll come home and she'll be like, we did this. And I'm like, where do you even come up with these ideas? Yeah. And I have to say, Jan is amazing looking at this list of just her creativity and how simple these things are. And how I will share, I had a Zoom meeting this afternoon with a board that I'm on, and just going around the room, everyone is exhausted. And I thought it was just like, okay, the ministry or just public works. No, everyone's exhausted. So anything we can do, it's so much more impactful than if it was normal right now.
Right. Yeah. I this is, a lot of these things are actions, which we want to have people do these things. And again, there's a list at the Hope Rising page at BethanyChurch.com. If you click on Hope Rising, then click on upcoming events, you can find the PDF that has the full list here. It's also linked in the comments as well, so you can check that out. And then we would love to have you share stories. Again, you can do it anonymously. You can tell us, the full story as much as you want by going to the My Bethany link that's there. It's just, again, it's great to hear the stories kind of loop back around. I do want to say that even the ministry of presence and just being with someone and saying, hey, just want to check and see how you're doing, it means a lot to people, just because people feel really, really isolated. I want to encourage you too, not to John, but to all of us, encourage us to think about reminding people to be gracious with themselves. I call it the COVID rot. There's just this kind of low level sickness emotionally that we're all kind of dealing with. Whatever you're feeling about COVID, if you're scared of it, you're not scared of it, whatever, it's just a weird time that we're in. So when you're around somebody who's struggling, just to say, hey man, take it easy on yourself. This is a tough time. It's a tough time. So be kind to yourself, be gracious to yourself. We're going to get through this. I mean, the research is clear. It's not just like that's an opinion. Across the board, people are like, yeah, folks are struggling with this. Even if they look like they're doing great on the outside, inside there's this angst that's going on. So just saying to somebody, dude, you're doing okay, man. Just take a deep breath. We're going to get through this. That can be really liberating for somebody to not feel like, well, I need to perform. I need to be up to par. This is a challenge. And so let's be kind to ourselves as we kind of walk through this, walk through this time in this season.
If I may, Tim, one doctor I read calling it trauma, and he's not calling it low level trauma. He's calling it like you call big T trauma. So I know at the end of the day, often I'm like, I needed to do more. I needed to be strong enough. I needed to do this. And this doctor is saying, just relax. As a follower of Christ, like God knows what you're going through, and just seek to do your best, and then just leave the rest at the altar and let him take care of it. So yeah, I agree completely with what you said.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Awesome.
Yeah, let me just kind of piggyback on that real quick, and then John and I are going to wrap up here in a moment. But I remember years ago being given the article. I think it was called "A Pastor's Sabbath" by Eugene Peterson, and in this article, he talked about the idea that when you look in the Book of Genesis, how the days are described, and this is true in the Jewish perspective on time, is that the evening starts the day and it goes the full day into the next evening and into the next evening. So in Genesis, it'll say it was evening and it was morning. It was evening and it was morning. And it's a beautiful picture if you think about it, because the evening is when you and I are going to bed. And so in the evening, when the day starts, we're getting up. Let's say we get up at 9 in the morning, hypothetically. God's been working since the day before, the quote unquote day before. So we go to bed when he starts. And then when we get up, we're joining his work, right? God, I don't
Mm.
wake up and have God go, well, Tim's awake, everybody. We're going to start the day. God's working without me, right? And so as God's working during the day, I'm joining him. And that's a very liberating perspective to go, he's working when I'm not working. He's literally working when I'm unconscious and snoring my brains out of sleep. He's still working. And so I'm joining his work. And so as we think about that, as we engage with others, don't put all this pressure on yourself that, like, I have to change everyone's life with these interactions. You're going to be walking into circumstances and situations where God is already at work. He's already engaging with others. I want to just share a quick anecdote about that. I have a friend who was involved in a project where they were putting up some signs in town, and the signs were about loving people, how to be loving and kind to one another. And so he was putting this sign, and he didn't realize that he wasn't on the public property. He was on the edge of somebody's private property. And this woman came out and said, "Hey, don't put that on my property. What does that say?" And then he literally looked at the sign, and it read something like, "Be kind to one another and love one another." And the lady was just like she's yelling at him about putting the sign up, and then it's like, "Be kind." And then she's like, "Well, I like the message, but I just didn't know what you were doing." And so it immediately just threw her for a loop, right? But God was working in that situation that you would think he's not working. And so as we engage in these things, be aware that God's there ahead of us. We're going to engage, and then when we leave, God will still continue to be working in those situations. I want to kind of wrap this up, John, and Jan included some reflection questions with it, which I think is great. So just tell people about how they might use that. Again, if they have kids and young kids or older kids, but also for themselves, a time to kind of slow down and reflect. How can people use these to dig a little bit more dig more deeply internally in this process?
Sure. Obviously, with family, dinner time's a great time just to sit them down and ask one of them. Don't try to get through all of them. Looking at these four, I would take one of them, and it would take a couple minutes for all the kids that we have, four of them, three that talk to get through it. End of the day, if you don't have this discipline, I call it a daily, like a nightly kind of like debrief. And I just go through and ask one of these questions to yourself and just sit down. And if you journal, that's great. If not, just think about it, but just pause to reflect how God has used you throughout the day. I think it'll end your day with a little bit of hope and of an encouragement to know, okay, it wasn't just me getting my tasks done, but God is going to use those. Also, social media. If you're on social media, you could use one of these and bring it up for discussion. And just, I think that would be kind of cool. I have a friend named Thad. You know him, Tim. He's just always posting stuff. I can just see him posting one of these, and he'll just get a conversation going. And it helps you to process out loud, but also it gets other people involved, and you can be an encouragement that way. Or in the car, there's always places you can sit, turn off the TV, or as my karate instructor for the kids says, during the commercials, just something, pick a few minutes and do it.
Yeah, and the cool thing about this is that if you're chatting with kids or somebody, you're drawing them out into a conversation, and for yourself too, it makes you, to John's exact point, it makes you reflect, and then you start seeing where God is at work and God's using you. Because sometimes it's like, well, I didn't preach, I didn't become a missionary, so what am I doing? Like, no, 10,000 little touches and people loving their neighbor all of a sudden changes the world. So we're gonna wrap up here, John. Any closing thoughts that you want to share with folks as we close out?
Yeah, I would just say don't stress about this. Take part in this every day, but this is going to be fun. So some of you, if you're like me, it's just, I got to do this, I got to do it well, and you're going to push yourself. Don't push yourself. Just ask the Spirit to lead you. Know what that thing is for the day, that topic, that activity you want to do, and then just ask the Spirit to open your eyes to see the chance or the opportunity to do it. We want this to be a blessing, not a burden for you. That would be my big encouragement.
Yeah, that's a good word. And on that note, what you'll see on the Bethany Church Facebook page is each day there's going to be a short video of somebody giving you kind of a challenge of the day. So, maybe like I'm going to kick it off tomorrow, and maybe I'll be like, hey, you can't go out today because it's so snowy, but is there a way you could just check in on your neighbor by walking over, knocking on the door and saying, hey, you doing okay? Do you need anything? Right now, if you can engage in that challenge, great. You can leave a comment on the Facebook thread. You can also give us some information through My Bethany and share the story. But if you're like, you know what, I don't have any neighbors because maybe you're a little bit more isolated where you live, choose something else. We just want to keep every day. You'll see a short video kind of encouraging, inspiring you to try to engage in one of them. If you can't do that one, do another one. The hope is just to kind of keep this in front of us so that we are constantly thinking about, all right, who is our neighbor and how can we love our neighbors all around us? So with that said, we're going to wrap up here. If you have any questions, you can email John or myself. It's jlamontagne@bethanychurch.com and tcarpenter@bethanychurch.com. And, be in touch if you have any questions or you have any things that you want clarification on. We'd be glad to be a help to you. But go love your neighbor, show them the love of God, and share those stories with us. That would be really encouraging to us. So thank you for tuning in, John. I will see you, I'm sure, on a Zoom meeting or something sometime soon. And stay safe out there in Nottingham in the snow. All right.
You too.
All right.
All right. Have a great night.